things. We don't have any randomized controlled trials that show that supplement with vitamin D works in COVID-19, but we do have data about vitamin D specifically. And so I think it's interesting to go over. I've gotten a lot of comments from people about vitamin D and the potential use for the coronavirus. And even though this paper here is for the influenza virus, vitamin D is not actually having an effect on the virus itself, as far as we know. It's affecting the hosts, us, our bodies, our immune system, and how they deal with the virus. So potentially might be something that is applicable to other viruses, and in this case, the coronavirus. And if you've thought about this, you'll notice that there's a lot of talk about what will happen in the summertime to the virus. And a lot of the talk has been about heat and humidity versus dryness. And I'm wondering if there's another angle on this. Because vitamin D could be acknowledged as a, quote, seasonal stimulus as defined by R. Edgar Hope Simpson, it would be crucial to prove it from a potential easy and cheap prophylaxis or therapy support perspective as far as influenza infections are concerned. Now, this paper talks about how, first of all, vitamin D is absorbed into the body and how it is metabolized. The fact that it is a vitamin, you have to understand that we cannot generate or make vitamin D in our own body, but in fact, we need ultraviolet radiation from the sun to convert the inactive form to the active form. I've always had a special place in my heart for vitamin D because that's what I did in terms of my undergraduate research working in organic chemistry. And so you'll know that vitamin D, for those of you who studied the structure, is a lipid-soluble vitamin. And so it's possible to overdose on vitamin D, so you have to be very careful with it because it is fat-soluble. Now, there's a lot of talk about vitamin D in the immune system and how it bolsters it, but something that's also very interesting about vitamin D is its possible role in infections, and also it has a suppressive anti-inflammatory process. So in other words, vitamin D can turn things on and it can also turn things off. It's not unimodal. And that is something that could be very helpful, especially in the immune response that we see in COVID-19. Remember that it's the immune system that is going to suppress the virus, which is good, but it's also the immune system that could cause this storm of cytokines that puts your lungs into ARDS and could potentially kill. So what we want is a smart immune system, an immune system that takes care of the virus but doesn't put us into an inflammatory condition that could put us on a ventilator. So is vitamin D the answer? I have no financial relationships with any pharmaceutical companies or companies that make nutritional supplements in any way. This study that was talked about here in the Harvard Gazette may be what we're looking for here. It says a new global collaborative study has confirmed that vitamin D supplementation can help protect against acute respiratory infections. The study, our participant data meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is simply a study that looks at a whole bunch of other studies, breaks down the components, and makes a super study out of it. So they took actually 25 randomized controlled trials with an N number of 11,000 participants. That's a pretty sizable number. Most people understand that vitamin D is critical for bone and muscle health, says Carlos Camargo of the Department of Emergency Medicine at Mass General. Our analysis has also found that it helps the body fight acute respiratory infection, which is responsible for millions of deaths globally each year. Remember, this article was published before coronavirus. Several observational studies with tracked participants over time without assessing a specific treatment have associated low vitamin D levels with greater susceptibility to acute respiratory infections. I don't have to tell you that living in high latitudes, especially in the wintertime, exposes you to the least amount of sunlight. If you have the least amount of sunlight, you would conclude appropriately that your vitamin D levels are generally going to be on the lower side. While it's possible that the seasonal variation in the virus may still have something to do with the survival of the virus outside the body, but it may have more than we think to do with the survival of the virus inside the body. It is a postulate, but it's interesting. The meta-analysis of these trials, which aggregate data from several studies that may have different designs or participant qualifications, also had conflicting results. And this really has been the issue for some period of time. Some studies show that there is a connection that makes vitamin D look good in terms of preventing infections, others not so good. So to resolve these discrepancies, this research team out of Queen Mary University of London conducted an individual participant data meta-analysis. So what does that mean? They grouped all of these studies together and then they stripped it down to each particular individual. And that is very powerful, producing what could be considered a higher resolution analysis of the data from all the studies. The investigators found that daily or weekly supplementation had the greatest benefit for individuals. Number one, there was a benefit. And number two, it was the turtle, not the hare. What I mean by that is it was the daily supplementation, not the huge doses of vitamin D if you got sick. This makes sense. The people who have the lowest levels are going to have the best effect from supplementation. And it cut their risk of respiratory infection, get this, in half.
Peace, this is KT the Arch Degree, and welcome to Mr. G's YouTube channel. What's going on, y'all? Thanks for joining me. I'm here to talk to y'all about some information as I normally do. You know, y'all got 1,000,001 questions. I know y'all got all types of inquiries, but I think I'm gonna stick to a particular point because there's something kind of across the board right now everybody's wondering about, and that would be Wuhan, China. You know what I'm saying? Wuhan got a coronavirus right now. There's a big outbreak taking place over there that hasn't reached a pandemic. It's just an epidemic right now. And the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic is just remember the words epicenter and like Pan-African or Pan Am. When you think of an epicenter, that's like the center of something. When you think Pan Am or Pan-African, you're thinking of a cross, all right? So an epidemic is something that's happening in a central location, is where it popped off at. But when something becomes a pandemic, that means now it's spread all over the world. So it hasn't become a pandemic yet you can find it. It's here in the States. You can find it in a few other countries as well too, but mainly in Asia. Now, 50 million people are quarantined right now. That's the largest quarantine in human history. 50 million in 17 cities. So pretty much we witnessing the inception of a police state. Because, you know, nobody's gonna rock with no police state, but let there be some type of outbreak, folks ain't really gonna have a choice. So if we see what's going on right now on CNN by way of Wuhan, China, and apply that here to the States, are you prepared? Do you got enough water at home? Are you growing any of your fruits and vegetables? Do you got grain stocked up? Hopefully you're not dependent upon any products coming in from China. Because if you do, then you're gonna get flagged, boy. They're gonna be like, what you ordering from China? So why are they quarantining all these people? What is a coronavirus? What is this outbreak? What is going on? What's different with this than others? Well, we've heard of coronaviruses before. We've heard about it back in 2012 with the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome they call MERS. We heard it about 15, 16 years ago with SARS, which is severe acute respiratory syndrome. So we're dealing with a respiratory issue, something going on with the lungs, because when you hear the reports, a lot of people are dying from pneumonia and some heart complications as well. Once again, what is coronavirus? So they call it a coronavirus because when you look under the microscope, it looks like a sun with this rays sticking out. Those rays sticking out are what you would call glycoprotein. Most viruses, if they are enveloped, they have glycoprotein sticking out, which are these little projections that come out the envelope. What are they there for? They're there to hold on and grab to either proteins or certain things that stick outside of the membrane of your cell so it can find a way in. What a lot of people don't know is viruses can't be killed. Like, people be like, KT, yo, how we kill this virus? No, ain't no killing no virus. Like, you could kill a cell, but you can't kill a virus because a virus isn't alive and it ain't dead. And you can't kill nothing that ain't alive. So you got to think of viruses kind of like a crystal. Like, you wouldn't say, yo, I got to kill that quartz. You know what I'm saying? It just contains a great deal of information in it that can be accessed. So I would say, think of a virus like a floating flash drive. You know what I'm saying? Like a floating flash drive. And if there's floating flash drives, you could just pick out the air and grab a flash drive. You stick it in your computer, any type of files might pop up, right? Some of those files might be detrimental to your computer, to your hardware system, though. So that's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with a virus. In this case, like I said, coronavirus is called so because of the glycoproteins, and that's what they use to get in the cell. So that's a gem. I just gave y'all a gem right there. If the virus doesn't get in your cell, you don't got nothing to worry about. So most of the means in regards to getting rid of the virus has to deal with you preventing it from entering into your cell, you deactivating it as well. When you talk about herpes, when you talk about shingles, when you talk about chickenpox, they're all the same virus. So the reason why a lot of people are popping up with herpes right now and not even having sexual partners is because they have a dormant, deactivated chickenpox virus up in there, and through dehydration, through the lack of water, and through the activation of your lymph system, this reactivates the virus in different forms based on other problems you got in your body. So you can end up contracting shingles, or you can end up contracting herpes simplex 1 or simplex 2, and you thinking, you know, you just laid with somebody, so now you looking at them sideways because you like, yo, you know what I'm saying, why you didn't tell me, how could you do this to me? But it ain't even them. It's really you, what you going through, your stresses, and the lack of cleansing that goes on in your body. Now, the reason why people are having respiratory issues right now is because when we talking respiratory, what are we talking about? We're talking about the breathing apparatus, your lungs. When you breathe in, you're breathing in through your nose, you're breathing in through your mouth. It goes down your trachea, your windpipe, and then it bifurcates. Bifurcate means split, just like these trees behind me. If you notice, most of these trees, they got a single trunk and then a branch, it splits, like that one back there. There's a couple over there, all around. You go outside and look at trees, they all bifurcate. So does yours. The bifurcation of your trachea is your bronchial tubes. Then your bronchial tubes become your bronchioles, and then your bronchioles terminate into these grape-like, balloon-like sacs that are called alveoli. Now, the same way that the tree trunk bifurcates into big branches, then the branches split off into small twigs. Twigs terminate with what? Leaves or fruit. So you could think of alveoli as the leaves or the fruit of the lungs. Now, normally there's an exchange between gases. The oxygen you're breathing in is going into the blood, which are the capillaries that encapsulate the alveoli, while you exhale, the carbon dioxide is coming out. Now, if you suffer from inflammation inside of the alveoli, what will happen is you are now retaining water, mucus, and other microbes that make it more difficult to breathe. Think about it. If you got an oxygen tank and you go deep sea diving, your airflow is dependent upon the air and the pressure inside that tank. If that tank slightly fills with water or oil or mud, you're going to have a problem, bruh, underneath that water. So you got to think about it like that when it comes to your alveoli. Now, how does the coronavirus fit into all of this? Well, when our blood pressure drops, so we deal with certain situations in our body, our kidney releases something called renin. Our liver releases something called angiotensinogen. They come together. The renin clips off a piece of the angiotensinogen, and now you have angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1, that's the product. Angiotensin 1 then gets affected by an enzyme that's secreted by your lungs, and it's called ACE. Y'all heard of ACE inhibitors, right? I know a lot of y'all dealing with medications, or you know somebody who's on medications and popping pills. More than likely, they either got some calcium channel blockers, or they got some ACE inhibitors, or they got some statins, okay? ACE inhibitors deal with that enzyme ACE, which is called angiotensin converting enzyme. So, ain't nothing difficult about that. It's obvious an enzyme that converts what? Angiotensin. What are you converting it to? You converting it from angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Once it's converted to angiotensin 2, that connects with receptors in your lungs, and what do? You start to down-regulate nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator. So now you're dealing with vasoconstriction, meaning your blood vessels are now tightening up. If your blood vessels tighten up, that means the passageway in which air flows tightens up. That means you're going from a garden hose to like a coffee straw, all right? So then you have edema coming up, and edema and edema deal with the increase of fluids. You have an increase of the mucus lining. You have macrophages that are showing up, which are your cells that eat up bacteria and other microbes that come inside your body. They have the ability to slide in between the gaps of your cells. So your cells are their own thing, but they come together. And there's a seam, the same way there's a seam on your pants or on your shirt, and white blood cells can fit in those seams. So now you got all these white blood cells in between the layers of the endothelial layers. They start to eat up bacteria and microbes, they defecating. So now you got pus, and you got mucus, and you got bodies, and you got all this stuff. You're gonna have problems breathing. Now, all of this happens based on angiotensin 2 not being regulated, meaning if it just continuously gets produced, it'll lead to that. So that's why ACE, which we talked about earlier, has a partner called ACE2. ACE2 regulates ACE. So ACE2 actually is bound to the coronavirus. That's how the coronavirus gets inside you. That's how it gets the key to your house, or the key to your car, or the key to your mind. It's able to bind with ACE2. And because it binds with ACE2, the body recognizes it, and what it do, it lets it inside of the cell. At the same time it getting let inside the cell, it's also down-regulating or reducing the numbers of ACE2, so now you don't have nothing to regulate ACE. And because you don't have nothing to regulate ACE, now you're dealing with all those problems we just spoke before, which are all the symptoms that these people with the outbreaks are having. So what does that mean? That means that we have to upregulate, we have to increase the amount of ACE2, which is going to end up turning angiotensin into 1 through 7 and 1 through 9, not just angiotensin 2, which is an inflammatory response and something that increases blood pressure. If you're dealing with a fever or flu and you increase blood pressure, you're just going to create more heat, more fire in the body. You're not going to have the ability for nutrients and oxygen to get around the body so your body can get healed. You're going to keep, your immune system is going to get neutralized. And if your immune system gets neutralized, you don't have any defense upon the infection that is ensuing. Because viruses are not able to reproduce on their own. They have to hijack bacteria or your cells for its machinery, similar to men getting with women in order to have babies. A man can't have no baby. But if you find that right one, you could lock it down, and y'all could do some things. The next thing you know, 10 months later, y'all got a little mini-me running around. But that's the same thing viruses do, except the mini-me's that running around is worse than baby's kids. They don't die because they ain't alive, and yes, they multiply. So what we have to think about then is now we can understand why the lungs are getting affected, why people are getting pneumonia, why people are having respiratory issues, because this virus is actually hijacking a natural protein that we produce in our body during the normal states of blood balance, and using that in order to kind of Trojan horse its way into the cells, pretty much raping, because it's penetration without consent. Okay? Think about that. Every time you get a viral infection, you being raped. There's somebody that is penetrating you and dumping their DNA contents all up inside you in order to utilize your spirit, your body, your anatomical and physiological equipment in order to bestow its future generations, so it could survive while you have to tap out. Now, we got to deal with herbs or natural modalities that are going to cool the body, calm the body down, because what it's doing is increasing blood pressures, increasing heat, it's increasing fire. You overfire it up. So you want to deal with certain mechanisms that's going to help cool and calm that body back down and get all of that out of you. One thing that you have to do is make sure you hydrated. The first people to get infected are the people that are dehydrated and don't got enough water in their body. So you got to drink lots and lots of water. The other clue is the fact that it's called a coronavirus, and corona has everything to do with the sun. This is a disease that is running rampant because we are not exposing ourselves to the sun as much as we're supposed to. We don't have hair all over our body because our skin is supposed to be exposed to the sun for vitamin D. When vitamin D expression increases, we have a better way that we're able to deal with all of the issues that would normally hit our immune system because of the vitamin D increase. We know China is leading when it comes to technology. That means they leading with 5G. And if you do the research, you'll find out that there are studies out there that claim 5G technology stimulates the rapid growth and explosion of bacteria and virus. So that means I just have to infect 5 people. And if I create a 5G concentration, now I can infect more people because of the violent explosion of replication that the virus is dealing with inside of all these people. Now it's going to spread. So it's a twofer. It's not just the food, and it's not just the virus. It's also the frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum. This, along with dehydration, is what's causing all of this crazy nonsense. Now people are saying, "Ah, man, yo, it's man-made." Of course it's man-made, you know? Of course it's man-made. And that's not to say that this virus didn't stem from other viruses, but not far from the Wuhan seafood market where they say everything popped off, the epicenter, There's the Wuhan Institute of Virology right down the street, where you know they studying animals and they studying people. And Beijing, who, you know, they just had their infection statistics pop up. They're the last ones that had a leak at their Institute of Virology some years ago. So it's not far-fetched that that could happen. The main thing that I also want to stress is the fact that wild animals are the source of this virus as well, particularly bats and snakes. And you might ask yourself how bats and snakes get to people. Well, if you look at the 2011 movie Contagion with Gwyneth Paltrow, she played Beth. Remember, Beth means house in Hebrew. She showed at the end of the movie how she got infected. They ended up putting a camera in China where these bulldozers hit a palm tree and shook and bats flew away. The bats ended up flying to the fruit trees, grabbing some bananas. They took their banana to the pig farm. They eaten the banana. One of the bats dropped the banana, the pig ate the banana. The pig then gets taken to the butcher. The butcher's butchering the pig. Then he gets a tap on the shoulder. They're like, somebody want to meet you outside. The chef don't wash his hands. He just wipes it on the apron. And then he go and holler at somebody who wanted to speak to the chef. So when he walks outside, he grabs the person's hand. And that's the transmission right there. Now, that was actually doing China some justice, because if you go to the Wuhan seafood market, what you're going to end up finding is it's actually an underground black market site for wild animals, where you could get bats, lions, tigers, bears, crazy animals on the endangered species list. Let's put it that way. We know that we eating way too much meat on this planet. And cloning, messing around with genetics and genes in order not just to feed the masses, but to figure out how to Trojan horse some type of compound into food that will affect the psyche of the masses so that they're easily manipulated. So what we're looking at when you see, remember, we got swine flu, we got bird flu, now we got bat and snake flu. You know what I mean? Chicken flu. All of these problems and these issues are stemming from the overabundance of meat consumption. So we have to slow down on eating the meat. We have to increase our hydration. We have to eat more of these plants, all right? And we have to study these plants, because that's where we're going to find a lot of the antiviral answers to the issues and the problems that we got.